So I just want to say I appreciate the invitation. It's great to be here. And I've not been to Nigeria before, but I worked in Mali, West Africa for 13 years. And I know Richard Young quite well. I think many of you may be familiar with him. This presentation is titled Information Security Principles and Practice for All Staff. Now, that is not specifically designed for IT administrators, although all IT administrators should be familiar with these principles. It's really the kind of things that you need to be making sure that your staff understands. And just a really quick word on me. So I've been with Wycliffe Bible Translators since 1990. I worked as a software developer at JARS for 5 years in the early 90s. I worked in Mali as their IT administrator for 13 years. As you can see, now my job with SIL is in business continuity, IT disaster recovery, and also IT risk management. So my wife, Julie, is a coach and team coach for Wycliffe, and we have 4 sons. So I'm going to give you a quick overview of what we're doing. We're going to cover some definitions, and I don't think we're going to cover all this ground in 40 minutes, by the way. But here we go, 5 core practices. And the part that I'll probably skip is the 5 information security essentials. I'm going to talk to you about an opportunity for online information security training. I call it InfoSec. Also, just some specific steps you could take today. All right, some quick definitions. The first is information security. What is information security? It's the assurance that information is protected against disclosure to unauthorized users. That's called confidentiality. Okay, protected against improper modification or integrity, and to make sure that you have access when required or availability. Now, information security deals with all formats of information, not just computer, and not just digital. It's paper documents, digital assets, intellectual property in people's minds, and verbal and visual communications. Now, you may be asking, what is the difference between that and cybersecurity? Well, cybersecurity really is talking about protecting the information that we have on our computers and that's going across networks and servers and things like that. Okay, so also you may have heard about privacy, the need for privacy, and it's very closely related to security, but it's different also, and it's really a person's expectation or right that when they are disclosing information to authorized people, that information is protected, particularly any personal or sensitive information. I'm assuming that this slideshow, or I could give you a PDF of it, will be available to your folks after this meeting. So let me know, Chris, what you would like me to do there. So I'm going to go through what we're calling 5 core practices, and this is what we do in SIL. This is what we advocate, and this is basically a policy that we have. We want people to use password managers. We want them to make sure security updates are being performed on their computer. 2-factor authentication, also known as 2-step verification or multi-factor authentication, is required for our corporate systems. We do expect that people are handling data backup responsibly, and also that their devices are properly encrypted to protect them. I'm going to cover each of these things briefly. Now, I'm going to feel like that I'm preaching to the choir in a way, and I'm almost embarrassed in a way to present this information because I think many of you probably know some of it or all of it, but I want to go over the essentials, the basics, because they're very important. Now, security updates, what's that about? Basically, hackers create exploits and vulnerabilities, and software developers fix those problems with security updates or patches. Now, let me just go over it here in detail. So hackers discover weaknesses or vulnerabilities, and they write exploits using software or code to take advantage of those security vulnerabilities in operating systems. And this includes Windows, Mac OS, Linux, and for your smartphones, Android and iOS, excuse me, and also in applications like Microsoft Word and also Chrome, for example. So security updates are basically the moment when software developers like Microsoft and Google, they discover those vulnerabilities and they fix them in their software. And then they distribute the solution in what are called software updates or patches. Okay. They don't always get these, they don't always discover those vulnerabilities immediately. So sometimes we're walking around with computers that are vulnerable, and that's where hackers can do their work. Okay, but the problem is many people don't have their settings on their computers set up to receive those updates automatically. Okay, so I recommend that you set it to automatic, particularly for staff's laptops and workstations, because nobody's going to remember to do it. So as long as you have an internet connection and the device is configured to automatically install updates that don't require user intervention. If this doesn't happen, this is one of the primary ways that computers are compromised, okay, and also servers. And so I highly recommend that you do this. Now, best practices for clients, meaning your staff's laptops or workstations, I recommend you set those updates to install automatically. If you don't know how to do that, you could email me and I could give you some tips on that. Servers, if it's best to make sure if you're doing that automatically that you have a restore point, because once in a while Microsoft puts out something that doesn't work well and even potentially disables the machine. So generally we want to either test those or make sure we have a restore point so that if there's a problem, we can go back to the point where we were at. So it's also important that you periodically verify that the security updates are being installed. Okay, so that's security updates. Let's move on to two-factor authentication, one of the other 5 essentials, the second one. So we need to understand the importance of two-factor authentication and how to configure it. Okay, and generally going to either receive a code via email or using, like for example, the Google Authenticator app on your phone. Many people use SMS texting to receive that as their second factor, which we don't recommend. I'll tell you why in a few minutes here. Okay. All right. So reduce risk with two-factor authentication. So if you compare 2FA or two-factor authentication with the house key would be your username and password, and the code for your burglar alarm would be the 2FA. Now, not everybody has a burglar alarm, but anyways, it's a pretty good illustration to kind of get the point across, because if many people, at least here in the U.S., when you walk into your home, it requires a key to get in, but then when you get in, you also have to turn off the burglar alarm. So that burglar alarm is like that second factor. Okay, it's not a perfect analogy, but it is helpful. Now, here's an important statistic, and this is really, really eye-opening. In March 2020, Microsoft security engineers did some research and discovered that 99.9% of compromised accounts did not use two-factor authentication, which kind of tells, well, if we are using two-factor authentication, then it's highly, highly likely that we're going to get hacked. Okay, so basically,
Recording in progress.
Authentication set up. Okay, so and those engineers stated that 2FA stops most attacks in their tracks. Okay, so make sure you do that. All right, so you should explore your organization's specific requirements for two-factor authentication. I know SIL requires it for our email as well as for our other corporate accounts. I hope that your organization does. If not, maybe that would be worth some discussion of some sort. So in addition to just whatever your organization is doing, I'll just highly recommend that for you personally, and also for what other accounts there are in your work, that you set up two-factor authentication for any high-risk accounts, especially your password manager, also for things like banking and so forth. And also for your social media. You don't want anybody stealing that either. Okay, so let's talk about password management here. So we want to avoid any password bad practices. And we see one there on the screen. I know some of you probably have seen folks that maybe they write their password on a little sticky note and they put it on the, beneath their keyboard or something like that. Well, that's not a great practice. That just makes it easy, to get into someone's computer. And also, let's talk about what makes a good password. Let's talk about the benefit of password managers, as well as making sure that you have a password recovery option. First of all, avoid simple passwords. Simple passwords are easily compromised. Okay, so we don't typically have the scenario happening that comes to most people's minds when they think about the word hacker. Most people think about the word hacker, they're thinking of a guy, with a hoodie that's, in a back dark room trying to break into accounts. Well, that does happen, but what's really happening behind the scenes is there are automated password guessing tools that are scanning the internet constantly, okay, 24/7, all the time. And if you're using an easy to guess password, guess what? It's going to get found. Okay, so please don't make yourself an easy target by using passwords such as password. You'd be surprised how many people use that one, or some number sequence that's easily guessed, or some obvious word. Okay. Also, don't reuse passwords. Using the same password for multiple accounts is easy and convenient for the user, but it also makes it easy and convenient for hackers. So that's not something you want to do. Don't use the same password over and over, or even for more than one account. So if they guess your password, if the hacker or the automated hacking tool, okay, guess a password guessing tool, if it guesses your password for one online account, they now have potential access to all other online accounts using that same password if you've used the same password. And this is called password spraying. It's a technique that hackers use frequently. So you also want to avoid using personal information in passwords. So in other words, I highly recommend don't create a password using your birthday, your name, or other personal information hackers can find on the internet, or your children's birthday or name or anything. And that maybe it makes it easy for you to remember, but that information oftentimes is accessible on the internet. So these hacking tools can use that information to try to guess your password. So don't use that personal information. Now, what does make a good password? All right, so this chart is from a guy called, I can't even remember his name, but his company is called Movasi, okay? He's very smart with cybersecurity things. And this chart demonstrates the importance of several things, okay, for creating a good password. And so if you notice here, I hope you can see my mouse going up and down. The first column is the length of password characters. So let's say if you used a password that had 8 characters and it used only numbers, then it could be guessed instantly. Okay, if it had 8 characters in it, used a lower and uppercase alphabet, well, it would take 3 hours. That's still not very long. If it used mixed numbers and lower and uppercase alphabet characters, in 10 days, and a full 57 days if you're using all those things. But that's still not a great password. So I recommend, if you're using a password especially for critical accounts of only 8 characters, you need to change that up. So randomness is another thing that makes a good password. All right. So in other words, we don't want to use a phrase, for example, that's commonly guessed and known that is on the internet. So Mary had a little lamb, and using the first letters of each of those words is not a good idea for a password. It's just easily guessed. It's known to hackers. Length and randomness and complexity. Okay, so you can see that if you were to use a password that had 16 characters, okay, you're saying, man, 16 characters, that's a long password. Well, it is. But it's going to take, if it's only numbers, a full year for hacking tools to guess that, and a billion years if you're using more complex. So you can see 16 characters is a good length. And personally, I recommend at least 16 characters for your passwords. Now you're thinking, maybe, man, that's a lot to remember, but in truth, you really only need to use one very good password in general, and that is for your password manager. You can see it's hopeless to remember multiple long, random, and complex passwords. Our human brains do not do that well, but password managers were actually designed to do that. Okay, so I'm going to give you a couple of recommendations, and you may have your favorite password manager. That's fine. Okay, within SIL, we've looked at various password managers. We haven't done like a thorough analysis, but we've come up with 2 that we like. We do like 1Password, and one of the reasons we like it is because it works really well for teams, like software development teams, or teams of, let's say, maybe well, I don't know, whatever your team does. It could be a team of translators, for example. Okay, so that's a good one. It is not a free password manager, so be aware of that. I would not say the cost is exorbitant, but it's not free. Bitwarden is another really good one. It's not designed specifically for teams, I don't think, but there is a free version. I highly recommend that as well. Now, why are we not including LastPass? Well, LastPass is not listed as one of our recommended password managers because they have had a history of security breaches. Okay, so I imagine many of you are using LastPass, and I'm not going to say, well, you absolutely must get away from LastPass if you're using it. But let's just say this: if please don't recommend LastPass to staff as a good option, because we don't think it's a good option. They have made some changes that have improved their security posture. But anyways, I would steer away from it if you could. Okay. So it's important to think about, if you have, as we say, I don't know if you guys in Nigeria use the same saying, but where there's a saying, don't put all your eggs in one basket. Well, in truth, when you're using a password manager, you are putting all your eggs in one basket. So you don't want to forget your master password. So these 2 password managers that I mentioned, 1Password and Bitwarden, they do have a good emergency recovery option in place, but that requires, when you set it up, that you set up that emergency recovery, and it normally is going to give you a sheet of paper that you print out and you put it in a secure place, and that will enable you to get back in. Okay, or wherever you want to store that sort of thing. Okay. So you also don't want to be in a situation where, let's say you've got your password for your email stored in your password manager, and then your email is your recovery method for your password manager. That's not a great situation to be in. Basically, you locked yourself out. So you need to be cognizant of these things when you are using a password manager. I still think that the risk of not using a password manager, of reusing the same password, or putting them all on a sheet of paper or on a file in your computer, has significantly more risk than using a password manager. So just a quick word of caution on using SMS. Okay, texting. Well, I'm talking about using it as a password manager recovery method or is a 2FA, two-factor authentication method, it's not recommended. And why is that? Well, it's not considered secure. Why is it not secure? It's not secure because it's not encrypted. Okay, so in other words, whatever you send on text, I'm not talking about WhatsApp. Okay, it is encrypted. Okay, I'm talking about just plain old text. When you're sending that and it goes to your phone service provider and across the channels that it goes to its destination, it travels unencrypted. It is not encrypted. And so if you have a bad actor at your, at the phone company, or if you have more likely than that, a man in the middle attack that is trying to steal information, then that could be compromised. And so we don't want to, that's why we're not going to recommend that as a way to set up a password recovery method. And I know that it's used all the time, but I'm just letting you know it's not secure. So how many passwords will you need to remember? Well, you will need one for your computer and or your smartphone. You will need one for your password manager, and you will need one for your second factor. For example, it's often your email to get into your password manager. When I say second factor, I really mean your recovery method. So just make sure that you remember that last point there. So you don't have to remember that many passwords, okay? Maybe a maximum of 3 if you are using a password manager. So another thing, the fourth thing I believe is data backup. So you don't want all that hard-earned, all that hard work to go down the drain, so to speak, if somebody's computer crashes or is stolen or whatever. So you want to provide backup options to your staff, or at least if your organization has tools, corporate tools to allow staff to back up their data, then your staff needs to be made aware of that. And now, not everybody does that. Now, SIL, we use a program called Crash Plan, which is used to back up data from our computers. And we also use a program called Backupify, which is used to back up our cloud data on Google Workspace. Okay, so but let's talk about all this for a minute. So provide those backup options or make staff aware of what the corporate backup requirements are. You also want to differentiate backup, meaning explain to staff and understand that there's backup for local data, meaning data that's on a person's computer, data that's on your server, okay? And there's also backup for data that's hosted already on the cloud. That's called cloud-to-cloud backup. Now, another thing we'll talk about briefly is that just you should be aware that ransomware can affect both local and cloud data, okay? That may be surprising to some of you, but it can affect cloud-based data as well. So local backup from a laptop or server, you want to use corporate backup. It's available. And I suggest that you are backing up to both the cloud and to an external drive. Okay, so now, for example, with Crash Plan, and that is certainly not the only option. There's a lot of options out there, and it's generally called cloud backup, that allows you to back up data from your computer to a secure cloud environment. Okay, so the thing about it is that it does require bandwidth. And if your the place where you're working, your center of operations, or if your translators out in the field don't have good internet access, cloud backup may only work for them, let's say, when they are coming back to the center. Okay, so you want to really think about 2 forms of backup at least. Okay, one is to cloud and also to the external drive. Well, why would you want to say, let's use both the cloud and the external drive? Okay, well, the external drive allows you to back up and recover very quickly, but the cloud provides extra security because you don't have to worry if the external drive is stolen, okay, or if it's damaged or whatever, because you have it backed up also in the cloud. So now, if you have a situation where cloud backup just simply is not feasible, for a translation team, for example. You could consider a backup strategy where they are using 2 external drives, okay, with one of those drives stored remotely, meaning remote from them. And let's say, for example, if they come into your center of operations once every 3 months, okay, then you could have them leave their external drive that they have backed up with you, and then take the other one back with them. Okay, so in other words, it's a rotating strategy, 2 external drives that are rotating. So that's local, backing up local data. Now let's talk about cloud to cloud backup. And many people are not familiar with this concept. And one of the reasons is that we have a tendency to think that if my data is in the cloud, it's secure. Well, that's true. It is actually more secure in a number of ways than it is if it's just on your computer. However, we can lose data, in our email or in our OneDrive with Microsoft or with Google Workspace. Things can be deleted accidentally. We might share a certain number of files or whatever with other individuals, and they might accidentally delete it. Okay, so it is important, especially for critical accounts, to consider a cloud backup solution. I've given you links to 2 there. One is called Backupify, another is called Spanning, and basically it just simply takes the data that, for example, that is in my Google Workspace account, and it backs it up to a different cloud repository, okay, all together. So anyways, I hope that makes sense, but we can talk more about that at the end if not necessary. All right, so normally setting up something like this does cost some money, so it needs to be a corporate decision. All right, so is ransomware possible for cloud data? Yes, it is. You may think it's safe up there in the cloud. Well, it's also being used on your computer, and you may also have downloaded an app that is used on your computer that uses that data. So a ransomware attack that originates from your computer, or your computer is the target, it can actually corrupt or encrypt, I should say, data that is hosted on a cloud-based app. It's not attacking the app itself, it's attacking the data. When successful, it encrypts the data and demands a ransom, just like normal ransomware would be, that's encrypting the data on your computer and demanding payment before you can access it. Okay, so there's a couple of links there if you want to explore that. All right, now let's talk about one more topic here. The last of the 5 core things is called device encryption. So we want to understand why devices and information should be encrypted. You want to be aware of the risk associated with that and know what your encryption choices are. Well, what is encryption, first of all? Well, it's a technical process that uses mathematics that renders data unreadable to those that are not authorized to access it. It remains encrypted until the owner's key, which is typically a password, is used to decrypt the data, making it readable once again. You have to, however, remember your password. Just as you need to remain in possession of your house key in order to unlock your door to your house, likewise, you need to remember your password for whatever you have encrypted. Otherwise, well, you won't be able to access it. All right, so why do you need encryption? It's a way of protecting confidential information. If your computer is stolen, the thief can actually easily remove the hard drive and access the information unless it is encrypted. And you may think, well, if he takes the hard drive out of my computer, he can't get into it because he doesn't know the password to log on to my Windows account. But when he takes it out of the computer, he doesn't need that password. All he needs to do is put it in his reader, and he can access that information. There are risks associated with encryption. For example, if you forget your password, well, the mitigation, the way that you deal with that risk is by simply storing that password in a secure place. It could be in your password manager, or you could print it and securely store it in a safe, for example. Okay. All right, so another risk would be if your encryption software fails, and the mitigation would be maintain a current data backup and verify it prior to encryption. Okay, so in other words, let's say your encryption, you forget your encryption password and now you don't have access to your data. Well, if you have a current backup, you do have access to it through another means, and then you could restore your computer, and it would require some work, but at least you would have a recourse, a way to do that. Now, that is a floppy drive, and I expect most of you, many of you, have not even seen that, but I'm older than probably anybody in this room. So anyways, thought I would just, give you a little view of what I used to work with a lot. All right, so what are the encryption technologies? Well, the one that you probably have heard of the most is called BitLocker. It is a Windows product designed specifically for Microsoft Windows 11 and 10 Pro or Professional, but it requires what's called the Trusted Platform Module, TPM chip, to work as designed. That TPM chip is on the motherboard, and it generates and stores encryption keys, and it enables automatic decryption with your Windows login. In other words, that hard drive cannot be accessed if somebody steals the computer and takes the hard drive out, okay, or the SSD out. They would have to be accessing it on that machine, okay? And so, and the user, normal user, whenever they log in using their Windows login, then they automatically, that data is decrypted for them, okay? Very effective and extraordinarily secure technology. Okay, now if you don't have Windows Pro, if you have Windows Home, there is an option. It's not as good as BitLocker. It's called device encryption. It's similar. No TPM chip is required. Not as secure, but it does require you to have a Microsoft OneDrive account to upload your recovery key. There's no way you can download it or upload it anywhere else. You have to have that Microsoft OneDrive account. I don't like it too well, but that's just reality. There's also a product called VeriCrypt. Okay, some of you may remember TrueCrypt from 15 years ago, and VeriCrypt is a fork of TrueCrypt, and it works on multiple operating systems, including Windows, Mac, and Linux. It allows encryption on 3 levels. An encrypted file container basically is just something that you take a large portion of your hard drive. Let's say you have a 500 gigabyte drive and you use 250 gigabytes of it for this encrypted file container. Then if somebody gets on your machine, if you have those, all your critical files, sensitive files in that encrypted file container, they can't get in because they don't know the password. The trick is you just have to make sure you don't leave anything anywhere else on your computer, like in downloads or whatever, or on the desktop that is sensitive. Okay, so you could also actually encrypt the entire machine, the entire computer with that VeriCrypt if you wanted to. That's not what I do, but that you could do that. All right. So this is what VeriCrypt looks like. It is a really good option if you don't have a system that allows you to use BitLocker. All right. Now, if you have Mac or Linux, there are also native encryption options available, which we won't talk about here. I don't know how many of you are using Linux or Mac, but this is something to be aware of at least. Now, Chris, how much time do I have left? I'm seeing that I only have about 6.5 minutes left. So there's what I'm going to call InfoSec Essentials. I don't have time to go through all of it, but basically you want to make sure that you're sharing information securely, that your staff is aware of social engineering risk. Also, you want to be, yes, 14 minutes. 1-4. Okay. All right. Maybe we can get through this. All right. So I'm just going to start with the first one, sharing information securely. All right. So this is one of the principles that we want to follow to keep information secure. We need to obtain permission from the data owner first. And we should not reveal any personally identifiable information or PII that compromises privacy or personal security. This has become more and more important nowadays, particularly with like the GDPR regulations that the European Union has now. Don't share sensitive information on social media. If your organization has policy on how to use social media and what not to put on it and so forth, you should be aware of that. All right, now one more thing about sharing information. So it is really, really easy to inadvertently, unintentionally share more broadly than you intended to. So for example, if you're sharing a Google Doc, if you don't understand the permissions, and I think there's like 4 different levels, then you may end up sharing it to the whole organization, or you may end up sharing it to over the internet publicly to everybody. So be aware of what those how those permissions work, and your staff should be aware of that too. That is one thing that you can help them with. Okay, so social engineering, you've all heard of it. Okay, basically it tricks people into performing actions or divulging confidential information from a variety of methods: phishing, phone calls, texting, counterfeit websites, social media, or sometimes even a personal visit to your home. That happens in every country. All right, phishing is the most prevalent form of social engineering. Okay, let's talk about that a little bit. Well, those are phishing attacks. I think most of you are familiar with those. They're fraudulent emails claiming to be from a reputable source. It's the most common way that hackers steal personal information, such as passwords and credit card numbers. Never reply to or click a link or open an attachment in an email you did not expect. So here's something really important. So how do you deal with that and this is something to convey to your staff. So when you receive such an email, you don't have to click on it, okay? If you're wondering, if you're not, first of all, some of them are obviously phishing attempts or scam attempts, okay? And you can just delete that. You don't have to report it. You just can delete it and move on with life. Okay, but if you're wondering, I'm not sure, this might be something important, don't click on the link. Instead, go to the website in your browser and log on to your account without clicking any links, okay, to determine if it was a legitimate concern or not. Okay, easy. All right. Now, there is a link in here in this presentation to something called Social Engineering Red Flags, and it's designed by an organization called KnowBe4, KNOWBE4.com. And it explains how to make an assessment of whether an email is valid or not. Okay, so I suggest that you become familiar with that and that you give it to your staff. Okay, it's available on the internet, so it's freely available. All right, now the next one is called Public Wi-Fi Savvy, or be aware of public Wi-Fi risk. So it's risky and should be avoided in favor of secure, password protected Wi-Fi. I'm saying free Wi-Fi particularly is risky. Or you can use a cellular data connection instead. So for example, if you need to do something on your computer and you come into a internet cafe or you're in an airport and you really need to access your email or whatever, if your smartphone allows you to create a Wi-Fi hotspot, I suggest you do that instead. Create a strong password for it and use that to connect your computer to the internet instead. Okay. There are risks with public Wi-Fi. For example, since public Wi-Fi is designed to be easy to access, it also makes it easy for hackers to compromise them. And a hacker can set up a counterfeit router hosted from their smartphone or from their computer. And it's hard to distinguish whether when you're looking for a public Wi-Fi router, it may look just like the router there for the airport or whatever. And if you happen to connect to that counterfeit router, called an evil twin attack is what it's called, then all of your internet activity goes through their device, possibly redirecting to a malicious website or possibly harvesting your logon credentials for your banking information or whatever. All right. So a little bit about VPNs. VPNs will hide your activity from an internet service provider and make it appear that you're connecting from somewhere other than your actual location, which can be useful in certain situations. Okay. They can improve privacy, but they are not a perfect data security solution, and they can give the user a false sense of confidence. So I'm not saying don't use a VPN, but I am saying don't put too much confidence in it. And furthermore, when you are using a VPN, you're shifting trust from your internet service provider to your VPN provider. So the question is, how much do you trust your VPN provider? Okay. Maybe they're certified or whatever, but anyways, I think VPNs are overrated. I'm not saying you shouldn't use them, but I'm saying you should recognize the limitations. And I would not, in general, do sensitive transactions in an airport over a VPN. I would wait until you get, to a place where you're confident that it's a secure location. Okay. All right, real quickly. So let's talk about reporting cybersecurity incidents. So this is something that you can think about, for your office or, maybe your organization. If they don't have a way for staff to report a cybersecurity incident, then it'd be a really good thing to do. Okay, so what is an event? That's simply something that happens at a specific time and or a place, but an incident is also an event, but it's exceptional and that it has negative impact upon an organization's assets. So a computer security incident is a special type of computer security event that actually does have a negative impact upon the organization's assets. Okay, so there's 4 types. So in other words, if you're setting up this, maybe it could be a Google form, that's what we use. Then we figured out there were 4 types of cybersecurity incidents that we did want people to report. And the first one was anything that results in data exposure, for example, compromise of a corporate email or online account. And this doesn't mean that the person got an email that was a phishing attempt. This happened to me quite a bit. What do you think of this email? What should I do with it? Typically, I just say, well, delete it. Okay, mark it as spam and delete it. But if it has, if somebody did click on a malicious link and it's evident that something was compromised, then a number of steps need to happen. One is that the email account needs to be disabled. Okay, by the whoever is the email admin. All right, so that's data exposure. Data corruption is when there's accidental or malicious corruption of, for example, of a financial database. It could be a corruption of a hard drive. The data corruption is one category. Data loss, an example of that would be a theft of a device that has corporate data or ransomware that has resulted in the loss of critical information. Critical meaning we need it for our operations to continue effectively. Service disruption, okay, would be something like, let's say, there's lots of examples, but it could be maybe a fire at an operations center that forces staff to stay at home pending repair. So any of these things you would want to report. And the reason you would want to do that is because it provides you with information that enables you to understand what are the type of things that we need to change, okay, and where do we need money for certain things. So, all right, getting close here. So what about the individual responsibility and organizational expectations upon staff in general? Staff needs to understand the importance of separating work data and personal data. That means that you don't want to use the same email for your work and your personal life, okay? You don't want to use the same password manager for your work stuff and your personal stuff. I trust my wife, but I really don't want her on the same password manager that I'm using for work. You get the picture. Okay, so all right, be aware of any corporate policies relevant to information security. Maybe you don't have any. I hope you do, but you should be aware of them, and your staff should be aware of them. All right, and all staff should understand any information security requirements that apply to all of them. For example, you should be doing backup. You should be using a password manager and so forth. All right, 3 reasons to separate your work life from your personal life. 1, information stored and backed up on corporate resources is owned by the organization. 2, your personal information should not be available to others using corporate systems designed to share and protect business documents. In other words, let's say that if I put my personal data on the corporate system and for some reason I leave the organization, my personal data is still there, okay? And you're responsible to use corporate systems to protect corporate information. Anyways, I hope that you understand this, okay? It's having work stuff and personal stuff mixed together is very problematic, particularly when somebody leaves or somebody dies, okay? All right, so there's a link here if you're interested in taking training that covers these areas. There is a freely accessible on something called Course Connections that SIL has. Now this is going to be going to a different learning platform, learning management system soon. But the link is there if you're interested in exploring that. Quickly, what you can do today. What should IT managers do to help the staff they're responsible for be safe? Encourage them to take InfoSec training. Be sure staff knows how to report a cybersecurity incident. Encourage staff to apply security updates to their computers. Very, very, very important. Encourage staff to upgrade their computers and or their Windows operating system. Also very important. Encourage staff to upgrade their smartphones as security updates are no longer available. I was using a Motorola phone. The security updates are only available for 3 years. Mine was out of date. I've got a new one that now provides updates for 7 years. Okay, if in case you haven't heard, Windows 10 support is ending soon on October 14th of this year. Microsoft will no longer provide security updates after this date. Computers with Windows 10 will be much more vulnerable to online attacks. That's why you really need to upgrade to Windows 11 and preferably Windows 11 Pro. Okay, like I said before, that allows BitLocker to be fully supported. That's it. Okay, there's some resources here, and now I'm open to Q&A if we have time.
So do we have any question from this hall and then the Musa hall? Okay, we have couples of questions. So Rob, please stay online. Okay, sir.
Okay.
Yes, bro. Please go ahead with your question.
How safe is it to save password?
Okay.
Thank you, Rob. Please, how safe is it to save passwords on Google?
Okay. How safe it is to save password on Google?
Can you repeat that question, please?
Okay. How safe it is to save password on Google? Is it Google Form or document or
Google.
Save. How safe it is? Is it safe to save password on Google? Google password, Google.
Is it safe to save password on Google Manager?
Yes.
Is it safe? Okay, I think I understand the question more or less. It is not safe. I highly recommend against saving your password on your browser, whether that's your Google Chrome or Firefox or Microsoft Edge. Don't do that, please. And here's why. If your browser gets compromised, and there are lots of ways for internet browsers to get compromised, and they have access to your passwords. Is that what you were saying?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, I would recommend against that. Okay, I mean, there are good free password managers out there, and if you use them responsibly, in other words, with the precautions that I mentioned, then you should be fine. And you can actually tell your browser to not save passwords. Okay, there's a way to do that that differs, depending on the browser. And you can delete them from there if you've already saved them there, if you're moving them to a password manager. Okay, all right.
Hello, we
Okay,
have a question.
Musa. Okay, go ahead, please.
All right, still on the matter of password. Like our facilitator made us to understand that
What is it?
all right, that we should not reuse our password. But in a situation whereby you interact with different applications on daily basis, and you don't want to make the mistake of using different password so that you don't forget. You interact with different applications, many softwares and the like. So, and you are using the same password so that you don't get lost of the password. So how do we manage that? Because I think you are recommending for us that we should not reuse passwords.
Another question from Musa.
Go ahead, please.
Yeah. Hi,
So my
Musa.
question
Okay.
is on the last thing you mentioned about Windows 10 and Windows 11. Recently, there's been a lot of Windows 11 crashing, and we saw that Windows 10 will soon phase out. Do we have any alternative? Or we just accept Windows 11 and be crashing our stuffs every time?
Okay, let me take those questions one at a
Linus,
time.
open source.
Then is free antivirus free and good? Free antivirus, are they good?
Can we pause for just a moment, please?
We still have another.
Hello, please. Musa Ho, please. Can you just attend to those questions first before continuing, please? Let him attend to those two questions before you proceed.
Okay.
3 questions, right?
Comment. I don't think it was a question as much as it was a comment, as it was rationale for why we're reusing passwords. Yeah, I recognize the fact that if you're, using if you are reusing passwords and there's specific reasons for it, that it's not going to be easy to change. It's not something you do in a day. So I would, I do think it's not. I do not think it's a good practice to do that. Okay, and it's not just me. Industry-wide, in the security arena. This is one thing you hear repeated again and again and again. Don't reuse passwords. And the reason is, if somehow that one password is compromised, then the hacker has access not just to one account, they have access to multiple things. Okay. So I would highly recommend that you consider going to a reputable password manager. It's not something, I don't know how many people, it'd be interesting to know how many people in this room are using password managers. But yeah, I would just, suggest, even if it inconveniences you, you should move away from reusing passwords. All right, so the second question. Now, I was not aware that Windows 11, I've not heard reports of Windows 11 crashing. Any computer and operating system is going to sometimes crash. I very seldom have problems with Windows 11 myself. That's an interesting question. I would say that you just need to get the problem fixed. Now, I don't want to trivialize, the issue here, but let's just look at the facts. Okay, one fact is this, and that is using Windows 10 beyond that date of, I think it's October 14th, is not a good option. So if you are able to, from a financial standpoint, if you're able to move to Windows 11, I would highly recommend it. I don't understand what the problem is, with Windows 11 crashing. Perhaps you could talk to, do you guys have interaction with Richard Young still?
Okay, thank you very much.
All right, there was.
Hello.
Is that? Yeah.
On Friday, okay.
Windows 11. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, most of the versions here, sometimes they are not really the correct one, they are cracked version. And those are the ones that are fading out. So how can we have access to Windows that are not really expensive? Yes, how can we?
We'll buy it
Because
now.
sometimes it's not easy to get a paid version of Windows 11 and 10.
Yeah, I do not have a good answer to that question. Okay, so now the one thing I will say is that unless you have a compelling reason to use Windows, Linux, Linux is a good option. Okay, unless your people are using Paratext or something like that really requires a Windows product. So, but I don't think you want to use a counterfeit version. If that's what I heard, I can't remember what you were saying. If your Windows 11 was bought through a Microsoft vendor, a legitimate Microsoft vendor, I can't imagine that it would have endless problems like crashing. So, but I do not have a solution for you in terms of financing that. I wish I did.